Hello, welcome to The Exhausted Programmer. My name is Alexander, and today we're taking another step forward in our to-do app. So a lot of things have been going on in my personal life, including a Windows update that just seemed to have completely broken my entire setup in order to make these videos. My webcams no longer worked. I had to get a new webcam, and then OBS was having problems screen capturing even a screen without a camera, so there wasn't any issue with the camera that I got. And of course now I have it working, so again, not a real issue with the camera I got. And I don't really think it's OBS's fault specifically, but just something in all the updates that happened. I do want to clarify that the worst thing that happened to me was the Windows update. Everything else that kept me very busy wasn't bad things. It was just things that happen in a normal everyday life, just all seemed to be concentrated all at once. I even recorded the midweek video ahead of time and had it all ready to go, but in all the stuff happening, I forgot to post it. So if you missed that, it will come out next week. I want to keep to the schedule even if I miss a week, but I definitely want to get a video out today because in my State of the Channel 2025 video, I mentioned I want to get 50 mainline videos out this year. So I only can miss 2 weeks, and to miss one in January is pretty bad. So the focus of this video was intended to be moving everything over to JavaScript. Instead, we're just going to move the front end over into React to sort of get us prepped in order to make the next step of just using JavaScript and no more PHP. And I'm still making my decision on what the backend will be exactly. I could do a file, I could do some sort of database. I'm leaning towards doing the database. It might add a little bit extra complexity, but since it's now going to be a whole separate video, I'll have time to explain it all without making the video too long. So let's just go ahead and get started in this video. I've dealt with Node in a lot of different contexts, both professionally and as a hobby. And when you're online, a lot of people make a big deal about what version of Node you're on. So I'm assuming that it's always very, very important. And oftentimes I will come into issues where the version of Node I want for whatever I'm trying to learn isn't the version that is available in the repository. But in this case, I got Node installed, just running this. Now I've already installed it, so it's not going to install it again, but this got me version 18.19 on a version of Linux that is based on the latest version of Ubuntu. So you should be able to just get it off the repository if you're using Ubuntu or Debian, or in this case, Linux Mint, and be okay to follow along. So I went ahead and made a folder for React. And in here, we can go ahead and create the framework of what we want with npm create vite at latest. And when we do this, it'll prompt us for a few things, like what we want to call this. So I'm going to call it just to do. We're going to do the React framework. I'm just going to stick with JavaScript for now. Again, trying to limit the amount of complexity added in a single video. And then it tells us exactly what we want to do next. So we can just do what it says. And when this is done, I'll start again. It honestly didn't take so long. 13 seconds is, yeah, probably right. Maybe 14 seconds with a little other stuff happening there, but whatever. And then npm run dev. And at this point, we're going to hit the next issue I've had with Node in the past, which is just the hints aren't as helpful. One of the things I've really been pointing out with things like Git and anything from GNU is how helpful the documentation is. Here, well, let's just see what I'm talking about. So there's security reasons why running npm run dev only hosts on your local host. And so I don't want to argue against that because security is security, whatever. But just to show what I mean, this is not being ran on the same computer that I am recording this video. I'm SSHing to another computer. If you're not familiar with my setup, that's fine. You shouldn't be familiar with everything I've ever done. But so if I replace localhost with the IP address of the machine that I want to get to, it says it can't connect. And that's fine. Like I said, that's a security thing. I'm not going to argue against that. But we might think, well, what if we do want to connect? And it tells us to use this -- host to expose. And so you might reasonably think that what you want to do is to use -- host to run. And the first clue that that didn't do what you would think it would do is the fact that the message didn't go away, but maybe that's just default boilerplate. But if we go back here and we refresh, we will see that no, it still doesn't work. And the reason for that is because you need to do this -- host. And now the network thing has changed. And if we refresh this page, it works. I also want to point out that in the description of this video, there will be a link to a folder that contains the things I've ran in Bash, plus some of the files that we will be creating in this video to help with readability. So don't feel like you have to pause constantly and write down everything I've done. It should all be easily available for you there. But, you know, if you want to pause and write down what I've done, you know, just go ahead, but you don't have to. Now, in the last little bit of my old man complaining, we'll get to in a second, and then no more. But I do want to point out what we see here is we have two logos, and when we hover over this one, we get one color background show up. Hover over this one, it's a different background. It matches the icon, but whatever, there's a button that we can press, all that just from running that one command. The old man part is that when we ran npm create and then the thing, it gave us a lot of stuff. And I mean a lot of stuff. Oh, I don't have that installed. This is why I like, well, things based on Debian at least, is that when you don't have something installed, it tells you how to get it really simply. Maybe that should be your push to do Windows, to do development on Linux. But we can do tree, and we can see just how long that went. 7,000 files just to have two logos, some text, and a button. Seems like a lot. And it is, but that's just modern web development, I guess. There are things to do that can reduce the size when you go to publish it, but you know, we're still doing dev work here. The web page that was created tells us exactly what we need to edit to change the site itself, but let's take a look at what we see compared to what we've seen before. We do have an index HTML. And when we go into there, we see our header here, the title Vite plus React, which will be what you see at this top up here. That's where the header title goes. We could change this here, and that's fine, but that would be the only change I'd make on this thing, and I don't plan on sharing it in the repository that I'm going to share, so we're just going to leave that as it is. And then we have this root div and then a script. We put our JavaScript inside the script tag before, but here, instead of doing that, and we could have done this too, we can point to a file, and instead of, again, writing it there, it will just put it there. Also, the stylized guide is not here. That is also in a separate file, something that we could have done in our previous one, and we're going to kind of do going forward, but just where things are compared to where they were in our previous video. It did say the script was found in the source directory. That's at least how I've always read src as source. And app.jsx or main.jsx is what the script says. The website says app.jsx or something, I think. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Let's go into main. And we see what it's doing here is importing some stuff. If you don't recognize all this just yet, that's fine. But import statements are like includes where you have your main library. And if you want to import just a specific thing from that library, you can do it this way. If you want to import everything, you just import the file itself. Here we import app from the app.jsx, and we use it like this. And this is a sort of shorthand. Instead, it could be written like that, something that's a little bit more like the HTML we've seen, but when there's nothing in between, you can just do it this way. Even if you have things set inside the header tag or the tag itself, if there's nothing in between the opening and closing, then you could just write it like that. And we'll see that later on. The next thing to look at is the index.css. And they have a lot of stuff in here, but if you remember what we looked in previous videos, we know that what this is saying is that any A tag will have this style. The colon and then hover should let us know that that means when our mouse is hovering over the tag, it should change. And we'll see that a little bit specifically because I mentioned something. The body will be styled like this, H1 will be styled like that, and the buttons somewhere in here, or actually it's in another CSS file, it'll show us some more things that we can do, like doing stuff based on tags like we did in the previous video for a test header. But you know, just standard CSS stuff, but instead of it being in our index.html, it's in a separate file. And we could do the same thing. And in fact, we will. So let's just go ahead and delete everything here. And I'm gonna go grab my index from my styling stuff from my previous video. So in our previous video, we had this inside the style tag, and we can just get all that, copy it, and just paste it And we don't need the indents. And I forgot a line, so there we go. And that will actually put our stylized stuff into everything, because this will be imported, I think it said in main. And so at this point, it will apply all the CSS stuff that we put in there to our entire app, our entire page. The app.css, we see the tagging, the root, and then the logos and the hover, and the React logo and the hover have different colors. That's why I showed off that one highlights blue, one highlights purple, because they are defined as different colors. I cannot just read these right off my head. I'm not that much into color design, but these are values for, I'm assuming, RGB. I actually haven't looked at the function drop shadow to see if that's what it takes. But here's some more CSS stuff, but we really don't need this. So we can just delete that. And that just leaves one more file we haven't looked at, plus this asset folder. The assets contains the logo. Well, we're not going to use the logo. And we just have this, and it does quite a bit of stuff, but again, we don't need the logo. We have no CSS file. We'll leave that. And we really don't need any of the stuff in here. And this is what I consider a basic template for a React component. Function, file name, export default file name. The file name being app.jsx. Obviously you don't put the .jsx because they didn't hear, but you know what I'm saying. So what does that do to our website? Well, the fact is it gives us an error. And the reason is it's still trying to import something because I did not save this. If I save it, now we just have the black screen. This would be white, but I did put in the index.css stuff specifically so that we wouldn't be blinded with the white screen at this point, or else I wouldn't have made the changes at all, just to show you that you can delete the index.css if you wanted to and just be left with the main and the app, which are pretty empty. So our goal is just to make this sort of like what we had before, and we're going to do it in a React style way, which is using components. Something to point out is that this function needs to return something, because we're going to put this into something that will build an HTML doc to be delivered to the web page, and it needs to return whatever is supposed to be in this component for that web page. So you're going to see something like this in every one of these. Of course, right now it is empty, but we could, you know, just say that this is our app. And then we can close the tag, save it, and then we go to our web page. We'll see that it is updated with this is our app, because right now the web page contains one component, the app component, and that contains this h1 tag in text. Maybe we want the app to contain two h1 tags. This is the second line. And when we do this, we will actually get an error, and it will say adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag, blah, 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 blah. So if you see this, what it is saying, this return function can only contain one tag at the highest level. And when I first came across this some years ago, we just wrapped everything in divs, but there's also these fragments that we can do like this. And it's sort of like an extra curly braces, which tells the React interpreter or whatever that, yes, this is what we want. And now we have our app and our second line. So we have two components being returned in the app because we wrapped it into one component. So this is being returned containing some nested information. And that's how we will build up our website to have more than just one component. So we can start conceptually building up our app. I would suggest trying to do this with as many little placeholders as possible. But in our original app, we had the header bar at the top, which was defined a certain way. We had a place to put in our input, and then we had the actual list of the stuff that was inputted into the system. It's all wrapped up in this fragment component wrapper thing. And so this will return. The problem is that these things are not defined. There's no default to do input like there is a default H1 definition. So we need to pull them in from somewhere, and the imports tend to follow a similar pattern, which is the component that you want to import from a file that should be named in a similar fashion. You do not need the extensions, but maybe you'll see in some places that they'd still put in the extensions. That's a stylized choice. And we can do it for both of these. Of course, the next problem is that these files don't exist and the components inside the files then also do not exist. So we needed to find them before our website will start working again. So we'll do that. And so the definitions of these files will be very similar to each other. We're going to use state in a little bit, so I'm just going to put this up there. But the function, the name of the component, I am right now just putting in the H1 header here just so that we can see it on the web page. No need to put in all the functionality yet. We just want to make sure everything shows up. To do input, and then to-do list, to-do list, to-do list. I guess I'm suggesting on doing this every time because when I was doing the research on this, I hit a big problem that spent me a lot of time researching only to realize that I had a typo in either this or this, but I had all this functionality also written in before I tested, and that just wasted my time. And here we see the to-do list with the space as we defined it in the app, but that the to-do input and the to-do list components are here because the text inside them are showing up where we expect them to be. So now we can start replacing each one of these components with something a little bit more functional. In our last setup, we had input text, but this is a single tag. And since there's nothing in between it and its closing tag, we can just close it off like this. The button though, there is some text inside. And so that we close it off like that. And when we come here, it looks like what we want it to look like, or at least closer to what we want it to look like. Obviously, it'd be nice to have something better than just a gray box, but you know, that's for a future video. We need to add functionality to what happens to the button and also to the text itself. So we'll do that. So we've added a few things here. We have these const here, new to do and set new to do. Set new to do will be triggered with the handle input change, which is set here. I guess let's start with the HTML elements here. The input now has a value, which is just a variable that stores the text, and an on change that handles when things are changed inside of it. So when we type in the letter E, handle to do happens, handle input change happens, where the event is set to the new to do, where it sets the value there. The value is updated, and then the handle add to do. We actually have a little problem here that we'll address right now. Whenever we go to click the button handle add to do, it will add the to do with the new function. So it'll pass in this variable into the add to do function and set new to do to a blank, which then makes the placeholder show back up, but it empties out the input. The problem is add to do is not defined here. If we search, this is the only place it's at. There might be something in the logs saying there's a problem. The website still loads, so you might not notice it if you're just looking at the website, but that is because we are actually going to pass this in from the parent component. So that's going to get passed in here. Oop. Let's take off the highlighting. And so everything is good to go. Of course, what happens in this add to do function needs to be defined somewhere else, and we will do that next. But this will handle the on click, handle the text being inputted, and again, push stuff so that the stuff can be added to the to list below it. So who is going to handle the add to do function? Well, the app, because this is what calls to do input, and it can be passed in from this area down into the child component pretty easily. So I'm going to define that. So to finish up with the child component, we'll pass in that function like this. It's looking for an add to do, and we define it as being this JavaScript function. If we come up here, we see that it's defined as a function that takes in a variable that we're going to call text because it is text information, a string. It'll run this trim function just like we saw in the previous video, where it just gets rid of white space on the front and the back end. Just a common thing to do dealing with the text, because again, depending on where the input comes from, sometimes blank spaces are added either by humans or by processes written by humans. And as long as it doesn't equal a blank space, it will set the to-dos to be what is already in the to-dos, and this new element, which is defined by having an ID based on the date now. This will be useful in a future video when we want to sort based on dates or maybe some other functionality, which we will have to define here, but we're just putting it in for now. And then the text is the text, again, trimmed to get rid of any unnecessary white space. And that will be how things are saved. I had a little mic trouble there, but we're passing in the to-dos in here to the to-do list component, but we're also going to pass in the functionality to do the deletion. The deletion is defined here, where we just use this filter function on the list of to-dos such that as long as it doesn't equal the ID that we're deleting, return it. But if it does, don't return it, and that will remove it based on its ID. This is helpful of removing a specific one in case there's repeated ones up there. This is something that was a part of the focus in the last video. I don't know, actually put it in there, but if we had multiple entries of the same type, you could delete the specific one you wanted to delete. This will do the same thing. We'll get the ID based on the button, and that will get us to delete only the one that we click. It is good to check your site. Obviously, we don't expect everything to be working correctly, but if you have problems that you're not expecting, don't forget you can always look at this debug stuff down here with the console logs and the debugger. This might be an extension I've downloaded at some point. Actually, this is a fresh install of Firefox and no extensions, so this should be available to everyone. And you see our layouts down here as well. And this could be helpful if there's problems that it's not very obvious what the problems are. The console should be plenty enough, but we're still doing good. Now we just need to update the actual list at the bottom of the page. And this file will actually not be too complicated because we're actually going to be passing in quite a few things that we need. So let's just go ahead and grab those real quick. I think it's good to see some stuff being put to the screen just to show you that, you know, it is that easy. Now we have the to-dos list. Now we have the delete to-do function, and we just need to put it in here as we would expect it to work. There will be a unordered list. So we'll have that here. And of course it needs to end at some point. So we'll do that here. And then we just need to use, you know, some JavaScript functionality. It would help to have the documentation up if you're not familiar, but we can just map each to-do in a way where the list item key equals the ID. This is how we will remove that specific, or this is actually how we'll get the specific one that we want to remove later, is by looking at the key of the list item. And then the text inside the list item will be the text. So this will just be a string wrapped around in a list item pair like that. Of course, this doesn't have the button in it yet, so we might want to add that, or we could test it out at this point, but you know, let's just go ahead and add the button. The button will have an unclick functionality where once it gets clicked, it won't take any information, but it will delete the to-do and pass in the to-do.id that is inside the element. And then it will have the word delete on the button itself. Of course, you can change that to whatever you want it to be. And that should be everything. I need to close out some parentheses. So we have what? This parentheses not closed out, this parentheses not closed out, and that as well. This is probably the thing I have the hardest time with my JavaScript, is just the layering of parentheses. Sometimes it feels excessive. Of course, this closes out the one up there. Luckily, highlighting exists on a lot of text editors, so that should help quite a bit. And here we have, hopefully, a site that works. So we need to go for a run. We can add that. We need to go for a walk because, you know, running and walking, whatever. And we can delete them. And so everything looks about to where it was at in the previous time, except now I would say it's a lot easier to read, because if you're having a problem, and I've realized I have these all open already, we know that our app contains these three elements, and then any of these definitions for these are in here. Well, yeah. And then these are actually at the very top, and we can dig in even further. But, you know, if it's just a matter of layout, we want the input below the list, you know, you could just move it like that, save, and now, you know, things will go up above, and it's pretty easy just to move these components around. This is also really good if you're maintaining multiple websites and you want to have, let's say, a header or a sidebar, and you want them to be the exact same on all the sites to create some sort of cohesive vision and stylized system. Just make each one of them a React component or a collection of React components, and just make it a library that you can, you know, git clone into your system. You can add that to the make file or however else you want to set up your application. So it just pulls it in automatically. And you can even script the updating so that any updates are consistent. You get the idea. React components are great because of the portability of it all. In the last video, our entire stuff was in one file. Obviously, something that small is easy to maintain. Didn't need to do it this way, but as things get complex, it really helps you focus in only on the stuff you need to know. And it really helps to track where stuff is coming from. So again, if we were in the to-do input, what we're expecting the form to be is just these two components. And again, most of the stuff is defined here. We obviously can import something here. And if there's import statements up there, we can also get more stuff. Hopefully the benefit of this is obvious. If not, hopefully it'll be obvious in future videos. I don't know how much I'm going to go with this to-do app. I do need one more video to handle the back end, and I probably will do a video after that just to clean up the front end a little bit more. I have certain ideas that I want to try out and to put into the to-do list to make the functionality a lot better and to really take advantage of the JavaScript nature of it all. It's one thing to have stuff just static on a page, but if you want stuff to be, well, added and removed, we already see that we need a JavaScript functionality for that. But notice that we're not at all hitting PHP at this point, but we're also not storing stuff. We'll handle that all in JavaScript. But I also, would like to just click and drag stuff around. And as far as I know, there's no easy way of doing that with just HTML. I could be totally wrong on that. Sometimes people can pull out some amazing functionality in HTML that I didn't even think about. And of course, CSS is always a wild card because it just does a lot. And usually I just use it to set the colors of the background and the text. So there's a lot more I can learn about those things, but hopefully I've taught you something about React, or at least made it seem easy to get into, because it is. It can get complicated if you follow the wrong tutorial, I can tell you that. But hopefully one of the things I focus on this video that comes through is how easy everything I'm doing actually is to do. Yes, some research and reading is required, but the actual steps are pretty simple. If you want to know more about React or any of that stuff, obviously look on their documentation. If you want to know more about the stuff I'm doing on this video, then check out my channel. If you like what you see, like the video and subscribe. Leave a comment, that's always helpful, and thank you for watching.